I'm a writer.
Yeah, sure you are, Daddy. And I'm a giraffe.
Hey there, my name is Dave, and this is my author channel that I'm finally getting around to getting actually launched here. So, welcome. Thanks for checking it out. And I want to let you know a little bit about what this channel is going to be all about going forward. Give you a little bit of history into me in a second. But basically, it's just going to be, little writing tips and thoughts about process and writing and rewriting and plot development and characters and all that kind of stuff. This is not reinventing the wheel. There are plenty of great channels out there, but I figured, you know what? Why not put my perspective out there, see if people have any thoughts, see if I can get any, interesting feedback, maybe give some people some ideas. So my experience we'll talk about just recently is I have a second novel that I wrote that got picked up by a very small indie publisher. And, as there can be a lot, there's some bumps from the beginning with some of the editing and getting that all sorted out. When you have an indie publisher or a small publisher, a lot of times they will provide you with an editor, and she was fantastic, but they rely on you to complete those changes and track changes, as they're called, and implement them into the final draft. And there were some bumps with that. So it took me a little while to get that cleaned up. But the book came out in October, and then the re-release with some of the corrections came out at the end of October. And it's called The Timberstone. It is a dramedy, I always call it, just kind of like a love story about a former rock star. And I've been a writer for a long time. I used to be a music writer, interviewed a lot of big bands like Metallica and Van Halen years ago. But in the last 5, 6 years, I've really been trying to focus on fiction, and that's where I intend to stay. So let's talk a little bit about the process and some of the things that we, struggle with or have issues with. And of course, one of the biggest things that I hear about all the time is negative reviews. And this could apply to Goodreads and Amazon, of course, would be the two big places. There's other places that people can, of course, put reviews, but those are the big two, Amazon and Goodreads. So the focus of this video is going to be how can negative reviews actually be turned into a positive? And they absolutely can, with one little caveat. So when I'm saying negative reviews, I'm talking about reviews that are honest and actually talking about specific things about the book or the characters that somebody doesn't like.
It's just dumb.
Now, if somebody says crap, I hate this kind of story, that's not helpful, it's not constructive, and you don't even know if they read the book. But if somebody gives you specifics of plot points, things about the character, little snippets of dialogue, and they're putting that in the review and talking about why they didn't think it worked, why it didn't resonate with them, well, that can be tremendously helpful, even if you don't agree with it. So let's talk a little bit how this relates to my current book. This is I just recently received the first, what I would certainly call first negative review, and but I was extremely grateful for it. And again, let me explain why that is. Because when I wrote this book, it's geared towards a demographic of, I would say 30 plus female would be it's kind of a love story. It's a former rock star guy, and that's who the demographic sort of felt like it was going to be. So when I got a bunch of beta readers together, it was important for me to get people that didn't know me,
I have no idea who this is.
at least a big chunk of them, who didn't know me, that were avid readers that read a lot of types of books, because I wanted to get honest and real feedback. And I did that, and it was overwhelmingly positive. And I even say in one of my replies to this review that it was almost embarrassingly positive.
Oh, yeah, buddy, you're amazing.
I was the one trying to be, self-deprecating and saying, "Oh, I don't really think that's that good," and blah blah blah. But it was very, very nice. And what that can have, cause to happen sometimes is you get a little too confident and maybe not work on some things that you kind of know in your soul there that maybe do need to be better developed. So that's sort of what happened. And I did have at one point an agent, and the gentleman that owned her agency. This is overseas. It was not in the United States, but really smart guy, really nice guy. He went through the whole book and he had some excellent feedback because it didn't sell. We got some nice feedback from a couple of the, not the, one was the big five, but one of them was like, I would say a top 15 publisher. And there were some great notes, and she sent me those notes. And, this type of book wasn't selling that well, that type of thing. It quiet stories, as they called it, and a lot more adventure and sci-fi was doing better. So it helped me getting into doing some additional rewrites before I ended up hooking up with this small publisher. But anyways, the point is that initial positive feedback from these beta readers, and I had a few online beta readers, they just kept saying they love the story, they love the character. Hi there. Little insertion to the video here that I just thought of as I'm watching this footage back here. So I realize it may sound like with this beta reader stuff that like 500 people read it and they all thought it was the most amazing book ever. Please don't discern that from this video. It definitely was, there were some very positive things. There was a couple people that said they wanted to tell a lot of folks because they thought it was, touching and funny and what have you. But, it wasn't the must read of the century kind of thing. It was definitely nice that some people had great things to say, but I don't want anybody to feel like I'm trying to say that, again, hundreds of people read this and thought it was absolutely brilliant, because it's not. It's a good book, but it's, it is what it is. Thank you. And there were some small changes recommended, but I think I got sort of lulled into a false sense of security, because then right before I did get it published, there was at least one reader who had a few, even the editor, she had some glowing things to say about parts of it, but there was a couple things she said, I just don't think this is working. So I made some pretty strong and prominent structural changes to the book. But, as writers, we know that we're always going to have to stop eventually. It's going to have to be done. If the editor says, okay, this looks good, and you have a publisher or you self-publish it, at some point you have to stop and let the work go. So that's what I did. And the initial reviews have been very, very good. But there's no person on earth is ever going to write a book that every person is going to love. It's going to be mathematically, statistically impossible.
Yeah, how you like them apples?
So I did get some good reviews. I got a couple random, I think 3-star reviews where they didn't write anything. They just, hit the 3-star thing and didn't explain it. Totally cool, do what you need to do. But this one was very, very detailed. And one of the things that it mentioned was that the relationship between the protagonist, his name is Josh, the main character, and this love interest, this former rock star, comes back from LA, moves to New England, and this relationship moves pretty quickly. So I think one of the things this reviewer had an issue with is that it just didn't seem like it was that realistic. Like it just sort of like, it's almost like they should have just been friends, which they were, but as things tend to happen sometimes in life, sometimes relationships can amp up very quickly, especially in today's day and age where Tinder and on these online type of things, you get together very, very fast sometimes. So I didn't hear a lot of that feedback from the beta readers or the editor, so I was a little bit confused about that. But here's again why a negative review can actually be a positive, because that was one of the things that I actually had thought about. Prior to beta reading anything, I kept saying to myself, do I need to let this relationship build longer? Do I need to let the reader see that, there's some real genuine, more chemistry between the two of them? And I did feel like in some ways I kind of rushed that. So this reviewer, kind of nailed that. And that was not wrong. They said that they put a couple little pieces of dialogue and had some nice things to say. This was funny. And I think they said that it was kind of cool to see a man writing point of view dialogue. They don't see that a lot or whatever. So that was nice. But the negative things were the relationship, some of the pacing and structural things. I think there was a few dialogue issues where it was like the person shouted, but there wasn't an exclamation point. So some of it may have been a little nitpicky, but here's the thing. If somebody's taking the time this is how I feel. If somebody's taking the time to read your book, they read your entire novel, 70, 80, in my case, 90,000 pages. And they've read it because that review contains specific plot points and little, like I said, dialogue snippets. And they don't like certain things. I feel it's, kind of our duty as writers and also just as human beings to listen to them and say, hey, maybe they're onto something here. Now, maybe they're not. Maybe they just say, like, I think this person had said, hey, listen, I don't even like dogs, but I really like the dog in this book. So that was kind of cool. But the negative things about, okay, maybe I did miss some exclamation points. Maybe the dialogue felt, I think she said the character also almost comically was just, too ragging on himself too much or something of that nature. So again, that's fine. Not everybody on earth needs to like anything that I write or anything that a writer with 1 million followers writes. And there's going to be that. You go to the top 100 novels out there and you go to Amazon or Goodreads, you are always going to find people giving it 1, 2 stars for this reason, that reason. Most of them are crap, let's be honest. But every once in a while, you'll read one of those reviews and they've thoughtfully, kind of fleshed some things out and said, hey, I don't think this works, this doesn't make sense. And there's probably some validity there. So I strongly suggest that when you get a negative review, as long as it's, again, not just a fake bogus one where they just like to give people 1 star or something, is that you take a look at that, you take a couple deep breaths, and you read through maybe that couple sections of your book or whatever and say, and at this point, maybe too late to change it, it's already published, but you think about that to implement for the next project. So maybe if the next project has a relationship between somebody, you say, is this pacing natural? Is this something where I would believe that if my friend was telling me that this is their relationship, am I going to believe this is actually happening at this pace? Or does this dialogue, feel genuine and realistic and natural?
I love what I see.
Would you like to touch what you see?
Yes, I would.
Would you like to go out with me?
Yes, I would.
Would you like to fuck me?
So, of course, nobody wants to get negative reviews. And if all of a sudden your Amazon or your Goodreads is getting peppered with 1, 2, or 3, even 3-star reviews, it can be a little scary. And at some point you're like, oh, should I just, take this offline or whatever? No, I would never suggest that. If you had a good round of edits and a professional editor or somebody who's a very good editor besides yourself, because it's always good to get other eyes on your work, whether it's the small publisher that gave me one, like in my case, or if you hire one yourself from Upwork or something like that, you definitely want to have somebody really go through that and just look at structural issues and plot pacing and all that kind of stuff. But once that's all done and that book is out there and you get that negative review, use it as like a springboard into your next project to say, okay, I'm going to take these little notes, these little digs, and I'm going to implement them if they make sense and if they're honest and genuine, like I said, into this next project. Because what it could do, think of it this way. So I don't have an agent anymore. She actually left the business and I ended up getting this publisher from some direct contact. But, I would love to get an agent. So my next project I'm working on, that I'm about a third of the way through, I'm really going to try to shop this and query and try to get myself an agent. So, in that book, there's definitely a relationship that happens later in the book as well. So I want to make sure that some of these notes and some of these things that this reviewer who dinged me said are thought of when I'm going to that process of fleshing out and developing that relationship. So, don't let negative reviews scare you. I know they can be frightening, and it's never fun to see that. You see your average on Goodreads of 4.65 or whatever, and all of a sudden it's 4.25, and you're like, what the heck happened? It's going to happen. You could write the most topical and just incredible great American novel that everybody's talking about. There will always be some people that it doesn't resonate with, and their criticism may be valid. It might not be, but as I said, I think it's indicative. We should take that responsibility seriously, and we should say, listen, you have taken the time to read hours and hours and hours of my book, or maybe less than that if you're a speed reader, but you've taken that time out of your life and you've read my book and you've got these different things to say about it. I at least have to consider it. I at least have to look at that and say, all right, maybe there's some truth there. It's just like, human nature in general. I mean, I read a great thing on some psychology website that you can't really be empathetic. You can't really have empathy if you're not willing to do deep self-analysis and look at yourself and be willing to admit you're wrong. And that's absolutely true. I mean, how can we as writers tap into this idea that we can be empathetic to characters that we create and make sure we're writing them, with truth and honesty, if we're not willing to look at ourselves and say, hey, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe the way I did this was a little bit forced, or maybe it's even silly. Or maybe the dialogue just doesn't feel like it could ever be true to what people would say with each other in this situation. So, again, these are things to consider. Does it mean you have to take a negative review and go, I have to give everything up and, take 15 writing courses or seminars? No, but it's worth considering. I would much rather see a review like this recent one I got that makes me think a little bit and makes me reassess a few things going forward than just a bunch of 4 or 5 star reviews that say, oh, love the book, couldn't put it down. I mean, awesome. You know, it helps, I guess, the algorithms and all these things, but what you're not really learning anything from that, you know. And even with like positive reviews, I would like to see, what did you love about it? You know, and I've seen that. There's been a few that have specifically said, you know, the relationship between this character Josh and, you know, this woman, the love interest, the dog, you know, his evolution of being kind of a shithead and, you know, former rock star that was, you know, just, you know, kind of a womanizer, and he just realizes, you know, what a kind of an awful life he's lived in some ways, and that being famous is really not what it's cracked up to be. So, you know, even that, like, I want to see in a positive review, what did you like about it? What was working for you and why? Because again, that would be something I'd want to maybe implement going forward in future stories. So, like anything, whether it's a relationship and your partner is telling you, hey, listen, it'd be wonderful if you could maybe try to do this a little less, or this a little bit more, we have to be willing to take that in, use it, let it empower us in some ways, and maybe possibly change our behavior or change something to do with our writing if it's a valid criticism. So that's my first little video here. Again, my book is called The Timberstone. I'm working on another one now. It's more of a thriller about kind of an assassin, so it's going to be a little bit of a departure from my past one here. But you know, here's the other thing. The final thing I'll say, just in general about writing. I mean, the publishing industry is, you know, you keep hearing is going through a lot of really strange things. Like, what can you write? What kind of characters can you write? What can you not write? So for me, I want to be very, very respectful and, you know, progressive when it comes to all these things, giving people opportunities and wanting to hear different voices and, you know, cultures and all that. That stuff completely 100% support. But one thing I also really want to support is the idea that as writers, as creators, we want to be able to create characters of all different types, and make sure that if we're doing that, though, we're doing it with some real authenticity and doing the research and making sure that we're not falling into cliches and tropes and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I mean, you know, I'm going to just write the books that I feel from in here, and, you know, what kind of inspires me based on things I read or things I experience day to day in my life. And that's kind of what you should do. I mean, this next one's going to have a little bit of a fantasy angle in it and stuff, and this is not something that I ever thought I'd really be writing, but I read a few things lately and they kind of inspired me to do something different, you know, kind of stray from my comfort zone. So that's what I'm going to do. But that's what's exciting about being a writer, is that you don't have to follow a specific formula. You can decide you're going to now write a trilogy in this epic fantasy saga, you know, or you could decide I'm going to write this very, very quiet love story, you know, set in the mountains somewhere. Just basically one character, like a bottle novel, as they call it. So, you know, just do what you feel, but be willing to listen to those people. And I'm not just talking about the professionals and the editors, but the people that are willing to take the time to read your work, who are avid readers. Chances are there's some pretty good nuggets of truth there.
Nuggets.
So anyways, thank you for checking out this channel. If you enjoy this kind of content, I'm going to try to put up a video a week at least. Please like and subscribe. And again, thanks for checking this out. Have an awesome day.